The Tale of the Sands. A stream, from its source in far-off mountains, passing through every kind and description of countryside, at last reached the sands of the desert. Just as it had crossed every other barrier, the stream tried to cross this one, but it found that as fast as it ran into the sand, its waters disappeared. It was convinced, however, that its destiny was to cross this desert, and yet there was no way. Now a hidden voice, coming from the desert itself, whispered, "The wind crosses the desert, and so can the stream." The stream objected that it was dashing itself against the sand and only getting absorbed, that the wind could fly, and this was why it could cross a desert. By hurtling in your own accustomed way, you cannot get across. You will either disappear or become a marsh. You must allow the wind to carry you over to your destination. But how could this happen? By allowing yourself to be absorbed in the wind. This idea was not acceptable to the stream. After all, it had never been absorbed before. It did not want to lose its individuality. And once having lost it, how was one to know that it could ever be regained? "The wind," said the sand, "performs this function. It takes up water, carries it over the desert, and then lets it fall again. Falling as rain, the water again becomes a river." How can I know that this is true? It is so, and if you do not believe it, you cannot become more than a quagmire, and even that could take many, many years, and it certainly is not the same as a stream. But can I not remain the same stream that I am today? You cannot in either case remain so, the whisper said. Your essential part is carried away and forms a stream again. You are called what you are even today because you do not know which part of you is the essential one. When he heard this, certain echoes began to arise in the thoughts of the stream. Dimly, he remembered a state in which he, or some part of him, was it, had been held in the arms of a wind. He also remembered, or did he, that this was the real thing, not necessarily the obvious thing to do. And the stream raised his vapour into the welcoming arms of the wind, which gently and easily bore it upwards and along, letting it fall softly as soon as they reached the roof of a mountain many, many miles away. And because he had his doubts, the stream was able to remember and record more strongly in his mind the details of the experience. He reflected, "Yes, now I have learnt my true identity." The stream was learning. But the sands whispered, "We know, because we see it happen day after day, and because we, the sands, extend from the riverside all the way to the mountain." And that is why it is said that the way in which the stream of life is to continue on its journey is written in the sands. This beautiful story is current in verbal tradition in many languages, almost always circulating among dervishes and their pupils. It was used in Sir Fairfax Cartwright's Mystic Rose from the Garden of the King, published in Britain in 1899. The present version is from Awad Afifi the Tunisian, who died in 1870. The Blind Ones and the Matter of the Elephant. Beyond Gore there was a city. All its inhabitants were blind. A king with his entourage arrived nearby. He brought his army and camped in the desert. He had a mighty elephant, which he used in attack and to increase the people's awe. The populace became anxious to see the elephant, and some sightless from among this blind community ran like fools to find it. As they did not even know the form or shape of the elephant, they groped sightlessly, gathering information by touching some part of it. Each thought that he knew something because he could feel a part. When they returned to their fellow citizens, eager groups clustered around them. Each of these was anxious, misguidedly, to learn the truth from those who were themselves astray. They asked about the form, the shape of the elephant, and listened to all that they were told. The man whose hand had reached an ear was asked about the elephant's nature. He said, "It is a large, rough thing, wide and broad, like a rug." And the one who had felt the trunk said, "I have the real facts about it. It is like a straight and hollow pipe, awful and destructive." The one who had held its feet and legs said, "It is mighty and firm, like a pillar." Each had felt one part out of many. Each had perceived it wrongly. No mind knew all. Knowledge is not the companion of the blind. All imagined something incorrect. The created is not informed about divinity. There is no way in this science by means of the ordinary intellect. This tale is more famous in Rumi's version, The Elephant in the Dark House, found in the Mathnavi. Rumi's teacher Hakim Sanai gives this earlier treatment in the first book of his Sufi classic, The Walled Garden of Truth. He died in 1150. Both stories are themselves renderings of a similar argument which, according to tradition, has been used by Sufi teaching masters for many centuries. The Dog, the Stick, and the Sufi. A man dressed as a Sufi was walking along one day when he saw a dog on the road, which he struck hard with his staff. The dog, yelping with pain, ran to the great sage Abu Sa'id. Throwing himself at his feet and holding up his injured paw, he called for justice against the Sufi who had maltreated him so cruelly. The wise one called them together. To the Sufi he said, "O heedless one, how is it possible for you to treat a dumb animal in this manner? Look at what you have done." The Sufi answered, "Far from it being my fault, it is that of the dog. I did not strike him from a mere whim, but for the reason that he had fouled my robe." But the dog persisted in his complaint. Then the peerless one addressed the dog. "Rather than waiting for the ultimate compensation, allow me to give you a compensation for your pain." The dog said, "Great and wise one, when I saw this man garbed as a Sufi, I was able to conclude that he would do me no harm. Had I seen instead a man wearing ordinary dress, I would naturally have given him a wide berth. My real mistake was to assume that the outward appearance of a man of truth indicated safety. If you desire his punishment, take away from him the garment of the elect, deprive him of the costume of the people of righteousness." The dog himself was of a certain rank in the way. It is wrong to believe that a man must be better than he. The conditioning which is represented here by the robe of the dervish is often mistaken by esotericists and religious people of all kinds as something connected with real experience or worth. This tale, from Atta's divine book, the Ilahi Nama, is often repeated by the dervishes of the Path of Blame and ascribed to Hamdun the Bleacher in the 9th century. How to catch monkeys. Once upon a time there was a monkey who was very fond of cherries. One day he saw a delicious-looking cherry and came down from his tree to get it. But the fruit turned out to be in a clear glass bottle. After some experimentation, the monkey found that he could get hold of the cherry by putting his hand into the bottle by way of the neck. As soon as he had done so, he closed his hand over the cherry. But then he found that he could not withdraw his fist holding the cherry, because it was larger than the internal dimension of the neck. Now all this was deliberate, because the cherry in the bottle was a trap laid by a monkey hunter who knew how monkeys think. The hunter, hearing the monkey's whimperings, came along, and the monkey tried to run away. But because his hand was, as he thought, stuck in the bottle, he could not move fast enough to escape. But, as he thought, he still had hold of the cherry. The hunter picked him up. A moment later he tapped the monkey sharply on the elbow, making him suddenly relax his hold on the fruit. The monkey was free, but he was captured. The hunter had used the cherry and the bottle, but he still had them. This is one of the many tales of the tradition collectively called the Book of Amu Darya. The Amu, or Jihun River of Central Asia, is known to modern cartographers as the Oxus. Somewhat confusingly for the literal-minded, it is a Dervish term for certain materials like this story, and also for an anonymous group of itinerant teachers whose headquarters is near Ault in the Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan. This version is told by Khwaja Ali Ramatini, who died in 1306. The Ancient Koffa of Noori Bay. Noori Bay was a reflective and respected Albanian who had married a wife much younger than himself. One evening, when he had returned home earlier than usual, a faithful servant came to him and said, "Your wife, our mistress, is acting suspiciously. She is in her apartments with a huge chest, large enough to hold a man, which belonged to your grandmother. It should contain only a few ancient embroideries. I believe that there may now be much more in it. She will not allow me, your oldest retainer, to look inside." Noori went to his wife's room and found her sitting disconsolately beside the massive wooden box. "Will you show me what is in the chest?" he asked. "Because of the suspicion of a servant, or because you do not trust me?" "Would it not be easier just to open it, without thinking about the undertones?" asked Noori. "I do not think it is possible." "Is it locked?" "Yes." "Where is the key?" She held it up. "Dismiss the servant, and I will give it to you." The servant was dismissed. The woman handed over the key and herself withdrew, obviously troubled in mind. Noori Bay thought for a long time. Then he called 4 gardeners from his estate. Together they carried the chest by night unopened to a distant part of the grounds and buried it. The matter was never referred to again. This tantalizing story, repeatedly stressed as being of interior significance aside from its evident moral, is part of the repertoire of the wandering Kalanda Dervishes, whose patron saint is the 13th century Yusuf of Andalusia. They were formerly numerous in Turkey. This tale has found its way, in an expanded form, into English through H. G. Dwight's Stamboul Nights, published in the United States in 1916 and 1922. The Three Truths. The Sufis are known as seekers of the truth, this truth being a knowledge of objective reality. An ignorant and covetous tyrant once determined to possess himself of this truth. He was called Ruderi, or Roderick, or Rodrigo, a great lord of Murcia in Spain. He decided that truth was something which Omar el-Alawi of Tarragona could be forced to tell him. Omar was arrested and brought to the court. Ruderi said, "I have ordained that the truths which you know are to be told to me in words which I understand, otherwise your life is forfeit." Omar answered, "Do you observe in this chivalric court the universal custom whereby if an arrested person tells the truth in answer to a question, and that truth does not inculpate him, he is released to freedom?" "That is so," said the Lord. "I call upon all of you here present to witness this, by the honour of our Lord," said Omar, and I will now tell you not one truth, but three." "We must also be satisfied," said Ruderi, "that what you claim to be these truths are in fact truth. The proof must accompany the telling." "For a lord such as you," said Omar, "to whom we can give not one truth but three, we can also give truths which will be self-evident." Ruderi preened himself at this compliment. "The first truth," said the Sufi, "is, I am he who is called Omar the Sufi of Tarragona. The second is that you have agreed to release me if I tell the truth. The third is that you wish to know the truth as you conceive it." Such was the impression caused by these words, that the tyrant was compelled to give the dervish his freedom. This story introduces dervish oral legends traditionally composed by El-Mutanabi. These, he stipulated, according to the tellers, should not be written down for 1,000 years. El-Mutanabi, one of the greatest Arabic poets, died 1,000 years ago. One of the features of this collection is that it is considered to be under constant revision, because of its perpetual retelling in accordance with the changes of the times.